Welcome to the Emily Rassam Show, the podcast that proves parenting, business, and home life can all be juggled, just not always gracefully. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share because laughter and maybe chaos is better when it's spread around. Hello, and welcome to the Emily Rassam Show. My name is Emily, and we are joined today by my very good friend, Becky Persaud, and she recommended this book to me. It's called Spiritual Mothering, the Titus II Model for Women Mentoring Women. And we decided we were going to talk about it and the importance of reaching out to other women that you know or you may not know well. And I want to first thank you for being with me today and chatting with me. Becky and I got to know each other because we're both science nerds, and so we decided we had to be friends. And today we're talking something very unscientific and more faith-based, so that's extra fun too. We're going to start out with one of my favorite parts of the book, where it talks about how countless women today need a mother substitute. And it speaks about the story of Naomi and Ruth. And I was wondering, Becky, what did you get out of that section of the book? What was your main take-home point for that?
Well, definitely. After I read that part in the book, I obviously had to go back to the original source and read the book of Ruth in the Bible and just looking at all the devastation that kind of followed her family with Naomi and losing her sons and her husbands, and then Ruth clinging on to her through that grief, but then also her faithfulness towards not abandoning her mother-in-law. And then also just following along with her as they just took the next day, day by day, and then also taking the recommendations of her mother-in-law and, oh, you should go here and, try to glean. And then also, you should stay only in this area, or, you should go and talk to these people. And just the faithfulness that she was toward her as well as to God, as well as being able to be a support to her mother-in-law, ultimately ended up to allowing them to have a great relationship. And the amount of energy that Naomi poured into Ruth had to be a lot as well. Whenever I think about today's day and age, after, of course, we are married and we have our children and we are moving away from our own mothers, it's so important to be able to cling onto other women in our lives, whether they are older and they've gone through more life, or if they're younger and you can share those experiences with them. And I just think that it's just such a great story in the Bible to show God's faithfulness. And ultimately, Jesus comes through that bloodline of Ruth. So just that faithfulness and that story.
I love that. That's a great take. And for those who do not know this story very well, I want to go back just a little bit and talk about what gleaning means.
Well, from my understanding, I believe that they had farmland, and whenever they go to harvest, they would leave the outer crops to for people to glean to be able to have a source of food.
Right. I always understood that it was the leftover and they would allow them to go pick through it, whatever was kind of on the ground or around the area. Because I'm sure, you have all these wheat stalks that they were collecting, and some of them are going to fall down and they're going to be going through the whole harvest and not have enough time to pick them all up. So that is what gleaning means.
And
Um,
she was in a specific area of this property that was of Boaz's, and that's who she ends up marrying. And then it was just the beginning of her second marriage, but knowing where she should go to glean and then also telling her how to work. And I know that she probably instilled a good work ethic and Ruth as well. And so knowing that, okay, you need to be very careful where you're going. I'm not sure what the safety looked like in that day and time for a woman out there in the fields as well. So once Boaz took a liking to Ruth, he pretty much was like, hands off, everybody. I'm kind of wanting to protect her until he kind of gets to know more about Ruth. But all of those factors, Ruth really didn't have to take in mind because all of those things were taken off her shoulders. ultimately it was God who worked everything out. But I mean, her safety was not only looked after by Boaz, but Naomi as well. So how are we looking out for the women in our lives, their safety and their hearts and coming to Christ, if we're not helping when we're seeing certain situations? So that was kind of my reflection into that.
Right. That's always actually been one of my favorite stories in the Bible, the whole theme of the kinsman redeemer, because I think Boaz was related to them, if I am not mistaken. I could be wrong. Sometimes I forget things. And so in the Middle East, it's definitely not weird to marry a relative at all. And that's where the setting of the story takes place. We're not entirely sure what area in the Middle East. I can't remember the name of what where they lived. But so from the Middle Eastern perspective and background, like you said, women don't usually go out on their own. And Boaz was her protector in this story. And her mother in law pushed her to get back out there and be faithful that God had her best interest at heart. It's just a beautiful testament to what happens when you step out in faith as well. And so, are there any examples that you would like to give of mother substitutes that you have? Brief testament. You don't have to mention any names, but we would love to hear a beautiful story about that.
Not just my mom. I was really close with an aunt growing up, and she definitely was a spiritual mother for me. And I would say, even now, doing Bible study with some of the ladies, I can see myself as being a spiritual mother to other women. So it's kind of nice to be able to see spiritual mothering. Sometimes it's not just about making recommendations of, good Bible reading plans or I'm going to pray for you. It's practical things as well. Just a matter of cooking a meal, taking something off of their plate so then they can be present with their children and not, "Oh, what am I going to do for dinner? What am I going to do?" And watching how my aunt supported my parents and helping with cooking meals and picking us up from school and having conversations, getting to know each other. It was just such a great relationship that was developed and a really good example of how friendships are not just about being one-sided, it's about that it is a two-way street. And I think that this book helped that. I would say that myself, like growing up, I always made better connections with the guys, not so much the girls, just because it wasn't as difficult, I would say, in maintaining the relationships, but
That's true.
also sometimes it felt one-sided where it was just they were asking a lot of me, and I'm like, "Well, that's not what I'm seeing from the relationships in my family." So now that I'm older, I realize that it's harder to make friendships, but because you do have to put in the effort. So if I'm going to expect somebody to be a friend to me, I also will need to be a friend to them. And in the spiritual mothering realm, sometimes depending on what the season is for that mother, if they're a new mom or if they're a new wife, that time commitment looks different. And I think that definitely stepping into those new areas of life and having grace and allowing for them to be able to set the time frame and letting them know that you're there, that's such a great reminder. And I love how the book talks about how more so when you are going to be spiritually mothering a woman that's younger than you, they really should be trying to seek that relationship from the older woman or the woman that's experienced more things, that they're kind of, they kind of look like a woman I aspire to be when I grow
Right.
up.
Someone you look up to and aspire to be like.
Exactly. And then as the older woman, you would want to make yourself available. If somebody's asking you, "Hey, would we be able to have coffee or can we get together and have a meal?" And invite them over if you're cooking a meal, or if you are with your family. It doesn't have to be one on one, just the way that you interact with your family and your kids, all of that eyes are watching is have you have children in your house, eyes are watching. That's the biggest example of Christ that they're going to get is that relationship, especially if you have children in the house, is by them watching what you do day in and day out.
I totally agree. I think because our kids are just observing us all the time. And by the way, Becky has 2 kids. She's in the kids club. That's why we decided to talk spiritual mothering together today. So, my next story that we're going to hit on is the story of Mary. And my lesson I pulled from the book on this one is that God uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And we don't really know how many mentors she would have had or like spiritual mothers. Mary, as our reference for those of you who might not be familiar, Mary, the mother of Jesus, was this story. And so, what does the story of Mary really speak to you about in regard to this book?
In terms of spiritual mothering, I would say that when we're looking at Mary, we also need to think about Elizabeth, her cousin, who also was pregnant with John the Baptist. And just if you think about the timeline when you're reading through the Bible, Mary had to have spent at least her first trimester with Elizabeth. And the two of them were together because she went to visit her cousin. And in that time frame, I would love to be a fly on the wall of all of the things that they had talked about. Because if you can imagine Mary not technically fully married yet to Joseph and being pregnant and just at that time and age, the persecution that she would have gotten, just having that encouragement while she's going through a very fragile time in her pregnancy to keep her stress levels down and to encourage her and for the two of them to bond, to imagine what their fellowship looked like in that time.
And I know it says in the story that Elizabeth was excited that Mary was pregnant. It's like our girlfriends today when you tell them, oh, I'm expecting, and they get really excited. It shows how you can go through situations with your female companions that maybe other people won't understand, or especially men, because they don't experience the whole maternity thing, the childbirth, the being pregnant. It's very different for them. And so it's important to have female role models in your life that you can really rely on, to be faithful in what you're doing and know that everything is going to be okay, even though it seems impossible. We're going to talk about Joanna in Titus. And oh, there was a John Adams quote for this one.
From all that I have read of history and government, of human life and manners, I had drawn this conclusion that the manners of women were the most infallible barometer to ascertain the degree of morality and virtue of a nation. The Jews, the Greeks, the Romans, the Swiss, the Dutch, all lost their public spirit and their republican forms of government when they lost the modesty and domestic virtues of their women.
Thank you for reading that quote for us. I just really enjoyed it. It was really succinct and it put together the point of this next part of the book really well. In this story, they're referencing Paul, and he wrote to the women and families in Titus about why it's important to be a moral guidepost for people when you're mentoring them. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and maybe give an example that you have thought of when you were reading the book?
So I definitely think that whenever we are having those relationships and trying to be in a mentor role, especially with younger women, we always need to take the higher road. Whenever we're mentoring them, sometimes they're not ready to hear what we're needing to say, but we still need to be able to guide with reproach and in a loving way. And that's why it matters so much to have that relationship so they understand the intent. And if the intent isn't clear, that you always are setting, okay, this is what I'm meaning behind this. And no matter what their reaction or their response is, we always have to have grace. We always need to approach it in love, because if you're not able to have that type of relationship, the real depth isn't able to mature. And then what's the point of the mentorship, honestly, is if you can't a real relationship that's open and honest, but you are definitely doing your part in showing love. That's, that Christ tells us to, and that Paul tells us to as well, as women that are mentoring and being that spiritual mentor. It really is not going to work.
It reminds us that this relationship, in layman's terms, you have to be able to call each other out when something is amiss without judgment. And, I have an example of this because I sort of mentor some women in business, and I said something so dumb the other day. brought up something that I shouldn't have in the conversation, and I thought about it for 6 or 8 hours afterwards because it was one little sentence, and I said, "I wish I had not said that." It wasn't appropriate for me as being a mentor and taking the moral high road, which I try to do. Um, and it could have totally ruined everything, but then I had a conversation with the person about it afterward, and I said, "Hey, I shouldn't have said that. It was not appropriate." And it ended up working out well because I brought it back up and spoke about it. And I'm not going to go into further detail. It's a reminder that sometimes one little slip up can ruin a really good relationship. And this section even mentions drinking too much can cause you to do that, or imbibing in anything that's not morally sound, or could cause you to say something not appropriate. It's a tough thing to do. It's not just easy. It really is a struggle from the side of the mentor as well. That
Sometimes it's as simple as just saying, are we good? You can tell when there's a little tension in the air. Be like, are we good? Did I say something? Just, I know that something's a little off. It gives them that space to be like, oh, well, I kind of took you saying this way. And then when you apologize, you do a heartfelt apology. It does not include, but I did this, or I'm sorry you felt this, but. You really need to listen and just say, "Dear, I'm so sorry for that. I will make sure that doesn't happen again, and that I love you, and thank you for bringing this." And that helps you move on. Otherwise, you're just going to continue in that eggshell
right.
environment, and then that's just a slow death of that relationship, unfortunately.
Right. And when you resolve conflicts, your relationship can grow stronger and become more deeply rooted. So that's a really wonderful reminder for us as well. And then the next one we were going to talk was about demonstrating love. This was a story about Jesus, and it says Jesus took off the outer clothing that would have hindered his performance to the task. To do love, we must take off those things that will prevent us from being a servant. This demands dealing with selfishness, pride, laziness, insensitivity, and anything else that hinders our ability to execute love. It really is another set of things that we need to follow morally and justly to be a good mentor to other people. What was there something that you may have taken away from that that you would like to share?
Definitely. So I would say, what are things in our today and age we are guilty of in terms of time suckers, I would say. And the biggest thing is we say that we're busy. We can't go and we can't have lunch with you. Or we can't go and cook a meal and take it over for somebody. But we really do have enough time in the day. We do. We just need to take off that selfishness of I'm going to spend this time, whether it's social media, even if it's I'm going to sit here and watch a movie, I'm going to read my book. It can be even good things that you want to do for yourself. Even exercising, you can do exercise with your mentor or your mentee. So you really can share that time. And I think a lot of times we say that our calendar is getting in the way of us being able to do that. I mean, honestly, if you do your meal prepping, how much extra is it going to be for you to put aside a couple of extra meals to go and share with a friend? How much time would it take for you to even send a text when you're thinking about an individual? I would say that that's something that I'm trying to get better in doing is I think about people a lot. And that reminds me of this woman that I'm having a relationship with, or somebody that I'm mentoring, or they're pouring into me. And we think about it, and that's our own. Like, how nice and kind would it be to encourage that friend of yours when you're thinking about them? Because who knows? Like, we're all in different seasons of life. She can be a new mom with a bunch of kids, and she just needs that encouragement to know that you're thinking about her. And I really think that when we take that picture and that image of Jesus removing his garments, and if he can do that to just show us how much he loves us, what are some little things and practical things that we can do on a weekly basis, even a monthly basis, to help with showing those women that they are loved? And I think that love that they get from another woman, it just really recharges them, and being able to do what the Titus 2 talks about. What the book is talking about is us making sure that we are foundationally in the home, loving Christ, loving our husbands, or serving our husbands and our children. I mean, we are commanded to respect them, and it's so much easier to do with the support of a good spiritual mother.
That's very true. And just so you know, everyone, Becky is really good at keeping up with things, even though she's not giving herself enough credit. She even cooked food for me when my baby was born. It was so sweet and thoughtful, and no one ever cooks for me, so it was just amazing.
I was like, "I'm cooking for a chef here, so just have grace on me with your critiques." And she was so sweet and sent me a video of her children critiquing me. It was just something that was so sweet for me afterwards. But hey, I went to visit her and I knew she had a little baby, and I knew that we would want to have some cherished time talking to an adult instead of children all day. And I didn't want her to feel rushed for dinner. So even that helped us with us fully enjoying the time and being present in our time when we were interacting.
Yes, and a pro tip I just discovered, you can schedule send text messages on the iPhone now. So if you
Ooh.
think of something at 2 a.m. and you're thinking of a person, you can set it to go out at 8 a.m. so that you don't have to send it right away. And that was my best discovery ever. Our next section that we wanted to talk about, I love the word discipline right now. I am working on that for myself and my children, teaching them self discipline. And one of the things that you must be disciplined in, to live a life of purity and following God's order, is discipline in reading the Bible and following the commands in the Bible, which takes practice. It's not a perfect thing. Discipline is taking time to do that. And so, what did you think about this section about discipline and the connection between learning this from older women, perhaps? Because I know a lot of older women are way more disciplined than myself.
The one thing that I would say is that watching my own mother have her one-on-one time in the morning with God, it really has stuck with me. And now that I am a working mom and I'm on the go first thing in the morning, even though I try to get everything set up the night before, you know how mornings are. And I found that it doesn't necessarily have to be sitting down at the kitchen table, getting up early to do that. I found so much peace being able to bring it into the car with me with the commute. So definitely have my Bible app going. And then now that I'm taking the girls, my daughters, to school on a daily basis, not only are we listening to the Bible, but we're also listening to Christian music and being able to worship and starting our day off with that. So I always try to listen to at least a smaller part with them and kind of like, what do you kind of think about this? What is something that we can do with this in a practical way? What is this telling us about Jesus, about God? And I think that being able to kind of tweak what I saw from my own mother and adapt it into my life for my girls, it definitely is holding myself accountable because I'm trying to instill to them every day when we get in the car, this is going to be a routine for us to do. It's not just about being disciplined and we're not going to watch TV on school days, or we're going to be disciplined in exercise, or not eating too much sugar. They need to realize that same discipline that we have in other areas of our life, we really need to put into learning more about Jesus. And if we just depend on Sunday going to church, it's not going to feed us throughout the week. And for us to be able to love sacrificially the people around us, we have to be able to see God's love for us and Him to speak to us. And that's through the Bible. So we just have all of his words that he's waiting to talk to us about. And I would say that I just have been loving my commute and being able to do that. This week I actually had to drive to Daytona a couple of times. And if you can imagine how many books of the Bible I was able to get through in that commute, that was such a great time for me to be able to spend inside of the car, just being able to get excited to hear God's word. And I almost, as soon as I get in the car, I am excited because I'm like, oh, I'm going to get to hear some of God's word. today.
I like that. And one of my previous interviews was talking about how she takes these little moments to ask herself how she is, but I felt they were very practical. And I know a lot of women who put Bible verses in all these locations. She talked about like brushing your teeth, because that takes 2 minutes a day, twice. So that's 4 minutes. And that adds up really fast. You would be surprised. I did the math for that in my book, and it was like 3 days or something a year almost of brushing your teeth. So it's crazy how small things add up. And that's the importance of discipline. It's little small things add up over time. And you don't have to do it all at once, which is applicable in not only your spiritual life, but your sports, athleticism, your eating healthy. Little small changes add up over time. And that was what I really took home from this too. And also the older women doing this and being very disciplined with their routines of reading and praying and etc. And I hope someday I'll be able to be as disciplined as they are. I remember my grandma's entire daily schedule from when I was a kid, and she kept that up for years until she got very old and was unable to do that. So it's a real testament as a young woman to see the older woman showing discipline in reading the Bible, praying, and all the other aspects of homemaking and life. It's very important.
It goes back to that we're always watching because in those instances, we're really not telling them. They're just watching us do it.
It's the quiet little moments that add up too. Okay, so the next part I was wanting to talk about, it's a quote from the book. Older women can do the cultivating, younger women need to do the instigating. And then the other part was, no matter how solid our relationships are with our biological daughters, their lives will be richer if they are also nurtured by other women. And then it says, you actually underlined this part. Biological connections sometimes blur our vision. And I 100% believe that. So let's start with the older women can do the cultivating, but younger women need to do the instigating. What are some ways you can think of as a younger woman to do the instigating?
I would say if I was a younger woman and I'm trying to get to know someone or I find something that I admire in them, even if it's something as simple of, oh, I tasted something that they ate that was like really good. Like, oh, would you mind showing me how to make this? Not giving me the recipe. Can I come to your house when you make this? So I can learn. And I recently had um a coworker of my mom's from growing up. She made the best pound cake ever. And she wanted to make one for my mom, but this year she was like, I can come over and I can show you how to make it. And then this way we're able to share that recipe with you and you know how to do it. And one of the things that she did in that time was whenever I'm mixing it, and I'm just making sure all the ingredients are getting together. I just say a prayer for the person that I'm making the pound cake for. So I wrote that in my recipe. While you're mixing, pray for the person that you're gifting this pound cake to. And just little things like that are things that I think can enrich the women that are looking for something, but they don't know quite what they're looking for. They just see something that they admire. And so I think looking for the space is something that you need. So having coffee will do that. If there's a specific topic you want to talk about, that can do it. Even just opening up with a text message and dialogue, like, oh, you said something and I just wanted to pick your brain on that. And that can even start the relationship, just texting back and forth until you can get together. You can even do Zoom. It doesn't have to be in person. Nowadays, it can be very practical, but it definitely is the person who you're seeing something you admire, and that is usually the person that needs to be reaching out. And you're not thinking teenagers or kids, and sometimes they don't know that they need to ask, and you see opportunities as an older woman to be able to do that, especially for women that may be not necessarily in your home, but nieces, nephews that are around you, being able to pour some time into them. And I know that sometimes I would listen, going back to my own spiritual mother, to my aunt. a little bit more than my own mom, just from obviously my own sin and my pride that I had towards my mother and trying to be rebellious, but taking it from another woman. So I just think that that's definitely what I was seeing here. And I realized that I really don't need to say, because they know everything, they're gonna say, hey, let me help you and pull you up and let you be able to correct your life. If you're not willing to make those changes and to seek that out, it's not gonna work. It's very much like if you're not ready to turn away from that life that you were leading before, or those sin areas in your life, you really aren't ready to have those conversations.
Right. And even just the asking part I find is it's tough. As when I'm thinking of myself as a younger woman, one of the things the kids and I have been doing is inviting people to themed tea parties. So we had a strawberry tea party this summer, and I invited a bunch of ladies that are retired educators, and they had the best time ever. So it's just get a little bit creative with how you ask and what you're doing, and it doesn't have to be anything complicated. Just read some children's books together and sipped tea and ate some cake, and it was a good time. And then I definitely agree with the biological mom connection sometimes blurs the lines, because I know if my kids are going to ask me something and I'll say, well, I love you the most ever, and I don't want you to ever be hurt, because that's just a natural feeling you have as a mom. And so it is very important to have other mentors in your life and motherly connections, because it's a little bit more unbiased sometimes. That's why you don't have a jury of your peers, you have a jury of strangers. Yes. So that one was very important to me. I know I've collected grandmothers around everywhere I have ever lived, and it's usually for food. I'll say, "Please teach me how to make these things." And that's how I became a good cook. It was all the grandmas I adopted.
Lessons have you picked up from them along the way, though?
A lot of them. And they've been very beautiful life lessons.
Amount of patience that exudes from those women and just letting things roll off their backs, like that's I am getting there slowly now that I'm getting a little bit older, but me being able to, and that goes back to our discipline and reading the Bible and being able to realize how short time really is whenever we are here on earth, and that the little things really don't matter.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. Okay, so then my next one, I put page 114. We're just going through this page by page because it was it'll work better. In case you wanna read it, anyone who's listening, it really is a beautiful book. It has some great quick reminders. It's a quick read, and has a lot of checklists in it, which I love because bullet points are my friend. So
I'm a
this
big
one.
list
Sorry, say it again?
I'm a big list person myself as well.
Yes, yes. We hit the high notes. That's what I like. Then we'll read more detail later when we get to the one we need. So this one is about verbal affirmation and speaking approval. So I'm going to read this quote. Verbal affirmation is essential to encouraging and equipping because women need the approval of other women. Simply withholding criticism is not sufficient. We must express approval. So it's really saying, oh, you can do it, and being their cheerleader. And is there any example that you can think of when someone was your cheerleader when you needed it?
I would say that while I was in graduate school, that it got pretty tough. And I would say that just some of the women at church at that time, just like saying, "Oh, that's amazing. You're being able to do it. That's just work your hardest." Just giving me little life lessons. And now seeing other women in my church that are younger, that are pursuing nursing or, degrees that can be very demanding, and just telling them, you know what, you can do this, you just got to take it day by day. I know it's going to seem like a lot between the didactic as well as all of your clinicals, and your schedule's just going to seem very packed, but just make sure to use your commute time to listen to your Bible and make sure that you're reading and praying for God to give you the strength, but you can do this. Just take it day by day. Don't try to look too far in the future. Otherwise, being overwhelmed can happen very quickly, but definitely you can do this. And just their immediate response of saying, you know what? Thank you. I thank you for telling me that I can do this because I wasn't sure if I can. And and then after they do it, even more congratulate and celebrate with them. And I think that there's a lot of times that even ourselves, while we're going through things and it's hard and we're just like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if I'm being a good mom, and being able to balance doing this or that. Just someone coming out and saying, you're doing such a beautiful job raising your daughters and look at how caring they are to other people. It just really like gives you that energy. That's like your Red Bull that gets you through the rest of the day.
Oh, yes.
It pretty much carries you for the rest of the day, and that's just God's grace in those words, and it really is any type of compliment that you can give to any day. I try to give at least one compliment to at least one person a day. If there's something that I see that I'm like, "Oh, that's kinda nice," or, I try to say that to them, so
Right, like saying your inner dialogue out loud and putting words to it, like your inner thoughts, because sometimes they don't have fully formed words to them and you just need to put them out there and speak them out there. And that's kind of what prayer is. You're speaking it out. It doesn't have to necessarily be out loud, but you're putting mental words to what you're thinking about and praying it. And you can pray with this person that you may be mentoring too, and do a prayer of encouragement with them and say, thank you for all of these talents that this person has. Let them be used for good, and please help them along their journey of X thing they are doing. So it's really, really important and encouraging to women when you or anyone really. It doesn't have to be just a woman. This book just happens to be about women mothering other women. It's just a testament to the power of prayer and the power of connection. And I think that there are many examples throughout the Bible about the power of prayer and the power of connection and how important they are for us. Even though the book was written a long time ago, it's still relevant today. And we can use these stories from the past to learn about ourselves. And then we're going to go one more page over. Wow, I didn't skip very far this time. Um, this was another one that really hit me like a stone wall, and I will say why. So this is a quote, and it's from someone who wrote in the book and was sharing their story. And it says, I don't go to some women because they give the impression that they are too distracted by things in their own lives to hear me. And I don't go to others because I'm not sure about their moods. And then sometimes I feel a warmth and openness, but just as often I feel as if I am standing before a stone wall. And I love this section because I have felt the stone wall many times recently after moving into a new area again. And it was like putting words to how I was feeling. And I was thinking, I don't want to be like that. I want to be welcoming and be able and receptive to connect with other people. But it's not easy for everyone. It just happens to be that I'm a very good connector. So, how is your own experience with stone walls and distraction? Because we can all have distraction and be guilty of that.
I would say that the two of us are very alike, that we're very open people and we always seek out to make relationships with people. But there are some individuals, even my own mom, that may seem like she's not as open and bubbly. But once you start to get to talk to them, then you get to actually know that they are sincere. So I think that like taking that judgment out and saying, okay, but they would seem like a stone wall, and taking a strength of my own, which is to step out of my comfort zone and talk to individuals. I think once we just start asking them questions about themselves, that we're able to kind of get to know them a little bit. And then also for the person that's looking at us, is to sometimes, I know I can be guilty of rambling on about everything that I have in my life, is to give that space and to be comfortable in that silence and to ask, how is nursing school going? And then just to be quiet and just to listen, what's going on. And I think that that plays to the point of what the book was saying, that we don't want to be stone walls and we don't want to have an attitude, but at the same time we shouldn't be afraid not to ask for some of these older women that you do see things that you like in their life, just because their personality is a little bit different and they may be a woman of very little words, that you can't learn from them.
They're very resolute, yes, sometimes, but they're usually also very fun once you get to know them, or a little dry, you never know.
And sometimes I find that the less words that they speak when they are trying to correct something that they see in you, that they are the ones that can really get down to what they're observing. And you're how sometimes we can not find the words to say, that they really do know the words to say, and they're able to help us in expressing and communicating better.
Right. That was a big reminder that I felt that I needed, so I wanted to include that in there. Don't be a stone wall.
Yeah.
We'll try to knock it down one stone at a time. Okay, and then we are headed to page 131, and it talks about admiring others and letting them know why you admire them. And I also wanted to read the quote from Proverbs: "Gray hair is a crown of glory, it's gained in a righteous life." Um, and then at the bottom it says, "We did our time, now let the younger ones do the work." And it's saying that younger women seem to think that sometimes. But so this is also another call to connection for women who are older, and you can work together. What did you get out of this one?
I think that I don't think I've ever met a woman that took the position of like, I've done my time, now it's your turn, you know? I know I've recently asked a woman that was older, like, now that you have a lot more time on your hand, that you are like, what are you doing with all that extra time? And for her to actually explain, like, when you get older, you move a lot slower and you really can't do all of the things that you can do when you're younger, and it just takes a lot more time. But she can definitely show me how to have a better prayer life because she is more purposeful with her time. But definitely just even hearing something like that has been able to let me look into that particular part in the book, and that we really need to take that into mind, aging, and that we need to be able to not only respect our elders, but also to take in mind that, yes, we are younger and that we can be the hands and feet of Christ, but we can do it at every stage of life. And it just looks a little bit different.
Yes. Yes, it does. And we know that well because we both live in Florida. So we have a lot of good people to
From
watch. Yes, yes, we have a good environment. I met a couple recently and they were both 95. I couldn't believe it. It floored me. We live kind of near the villages, so if that gives anyone a tip, we have some really awesome elderly people in our area that move here to still enjoy life when they're older. And I always ask them how they do it, how they look so young, and they say, "Don't ever quit moving." That's what they always tell me. How about you? Have you had any of those kind of experiences?
Definitely. So, all of the individuals that I've met, whether it's at work or just out and about, that idea of don't stop moving. And also, if they're going to serve or even volunteer, like the statistics on if you're going to continue serving or volunteering after you retire, if you don't start doing it before you retire, I think the percentage of you being able to continue drops significantly. I think it was around around 65, if you are volunteering before you retire, you're likely to continue with doing it, as opposed to saying, after I'm done with the workforce, I'm going to start volunteering. It pretty much is not going to happen if you take that standpoint. So just the idea of, yes, you may be working, or even if you're a worker at home, whatever it is that you're doing, if you want to be able to be available to have this time, you need to be wise with your time from now, um, just so then this way you can leave that space whenever you do become older. But I mean, I can be a spiritual mother to someone, and I don't have to be significantly old. My definition of old changes every year I get older.
Amen. Amen to that. Yes, and you're only as old as you act, I think, right? That's what they say. So, hopefully I'm gonna be about 25 forever,
Yep, right
physically,
there with you.
mentally.
My body tells me something very different, but
And so that brings us to the last section, and I'm gonna say beware of dragons. I brought this up because I see this theme a lot in different literature, that I've been reading about. And they often reference dragons in Eastern culture to signify chaos, and the chaos that certain things bring to your life. And so this just kind of popped out at me, and it talks about the church, and really it talks about being a cheerful giver. So I wanted to read this little quote, and it talks about dragons, and we do not want to be a dragon. We want to be the opposite of a dragon and show love. So it says, dragons do not accept the limitations or preferences of anyone who is not in full agreement with them. So it's also a reminder to us, maybe even politically, we don't have to fully agree with everyone, but we need to be able to connect with them. And then it says an attitude of love for Jesus and acceptance of others must permeate your actions. So it was a reminder, because I actually was reading it last week when some crazy things happened in the news for people sharing their opinion, and then they were shot. So, what did you think about that? About being aware of dragons? Because we can all be a dragon at some point.
would say even a personal story for myself is I know that my own husband and I, we kind of went through some counseling and we were doing great now, but just during that time, whenever I confided with somebody, that mother showed so much grace and no judgment. And that response in itself was everything that I needed to know that I can get the help that I need. And just if the opposite response, it would have led to a dragon, and it would have led to me not thinking that there's hope, that the situation would have turned significantly different. And I think about myself as a mother and the responses that I have to my children coming to me with little things like, oh, mommy, I need to talk to you about something, like, okay, now I need to be very careful of my response, because that is going to set the tone for any future conversations that may be bigger. For mommy, I need to talk to you about something that serious
Right.
happened. They may not come to me at all. And I think that my response when anybody comes to me to share something that's going on, whether it's caused by sin, it needs to that judgment has to be removed, because it is just something that can just explode a relationship. And I think that just the response that was given to me was such a great example for me, and it will stick with me throughout my entire life on how to be mindful of my response.
Yes, and I know I have to work on that definitely as a mom sometimes, because you're in the middle of something and three people are crying at once, and then they're like, I need this right now, and it's the most important conversation I could ever have. So I have been definitely reaching out to older moms for advice on how to stay cool in heated situations.
If you don't, being able to say, I'm sorry, that's something that is so huge. Is if you do have a momentary dragon moment, be able to come back and say, I am so sorry for that in a heartfelt way, because to be able to do that, especially even to our children, to say sorry to them, I think that that's something that wasn't a great example for myself growing up. And I think that it really helps them to where pride, because it's becomes a big issue in their life as well, to say sorry from a young age and really mean it.
Yes, yes. So if you find yourself being a dragon, apologizing is very important because you don't want to ruin those relationships. And another example of making a negative thing or a comment that you need to make into a growth opportunity. So I'm really a big proponent of turning anything that happens into a learning experience because we're all learning and growing together. I know I've never been this old before either, the same as my children. So what was your absolute favorite thing with the book? These were our topics that we wanted to talk about because we felt they were very important highlights to share from the book. Is there
I would
anything?
say my favorite definitely are the checklists that they have in the book, that they give on ways that you can practically mother women. And that was just so helpful to me because I'm like, okay, yeah, I want to do this. I want to be helpful. I want to talk to an older woman. But what does this look like? I have no idea. And I loved how, like, at the end of the chapters, you kind of had homework, at the end, like, okay, I'm going read the Bible. I'm going to try to spend some time doing something for another woman, asking some reflective questions. So I really like those homework assignments at the end. But I also love the stories. Like it really is the stories and what they got from them. And what I understood is like that what you're trying to specifically do and teaching younger women is sometimes completely different what they end up receiving from that experience
Very
and
true.
their takeaway from it. So it's just so great to be able to see those practical stories and ways that you can be able to help women around you and be spiritual mothers, and that we're, even if you're not a mother yourself, how you can still be a spiritual mother to the women around you.
Right. And so I have a quick story to tell about this book, actually. Becky brought me this book and she dropped it off at my house and she said, we were talking about all the things we need to do to be spiritual mothers and how we really need to take action, just so you know. That was a paraphrase, by the way. And she was looking at me like, just so you know that we all need to practice spiritual mothering. So that was part of the reason why after I was praying and praying and praying, I wanted to start a new business, but God said, "Oh, start a podcast so you can learn some new things." And that's why I said, "Oh, we have to talk about this on the podcast, this specific book," because Becky, showed up at my house and she was like, "You must read this book." Thanks for joining me today on the Emily Rassam Show. If you laughed, learned something, or at least didn't roll your eyes too hard, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, keep the coffee strong, your kids alive, and the dreams big.